Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today, and we're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Tassin Syed. He's general manager of health AI at Amazon Web Services, and Detlef Cole. He's vice president of global research and development for 3M Health Information Systems. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, John. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, excited for this discussion. You guys have a new announcement of the AWS Health Scribe, and it's in this ambient clinical voice, this documentation burden space that we love at Healthcare IT Today. So excited to talk about that. But before we dive into that topic, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself, and Tassin, obviously tell us a little bit about Amazon Web Services.
Sure. I can jump in on that. So let's see. I've been at AWS just about 2 years now. And one of the things what I do here is lead a team that builds healthcare and life sciences specific capabilities. So we have a number of those. We have like Health Lake, Health Omics, Health Imaging, and then obviously the newly announced Health Scribe. And then for my career prior to AWS, I was at a company called Cerner, which is now part of Oracle. And I was actually there for quite a long time, almost 23 years. So I've been in health tech my entire career, very excited about the space, worked in, on the EMR side, worked with population health analytics, et cetera. So have good background there. And I'm at AWS. What we want to do is basically remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting that customers have to do in order to apply technologies at scale to solve problems in the healthcare domain, right? So we're looking at, my team specifically are looking at what are kind of things that customers struggle with in healthcare from a scale, reliability, security, but also data management, ML perspective, and what can we do from a capability perspective to make that easier, faster, more secure, and those are the kinds of things we look at.
Excellent. Sounds like we have to have you back and talk about Cerner, but that's a topic for another day.
Well, I'm not at Cerner anymore. So.
Yeah, no, that's what we like. But no, I mean, we love talking about EHRs at Healthcare IT Today. Originally, we were called EMR and HIPAA and EMR and EHR, so you can understand our founding.
Yeah.
Yep. Detlef, tell us a little bit about yourself and 3M.
Yeah. Hey, John. So I'm now working a little over 20 years in healthcare IT. I co-founded a model in 2001, was a CTO for the next close to 20 years, and joined 3M when 3M acquired a model in 2019. Today I'm managing the R&D function for health information systems. Talking about health information systems, I mean, when you think about 3M, healthcare IT is not necessarily the first that comes to mind, but we actually do have a pretty long history in the space. So over 40 years now, we're working on it. We introduced DRG bundles in the late 80s, so quite a long history in the space. Our focus today is primarily, we count it in 3 areas. We count reducing revenue cycle-based billing, coding solutions, enabling value-based care through content methodologies. And then what today is mostly about is about creating time to care through clinical documentation solutions.
Awesome. Well, it's true. People don't think of 3M as healthcare unless you've been to HEMA, and then you know 3M really well. You've been doing it a long time. Plus, M-Modal, I mean, has a long history, that a lot of people are familiar with. So it's great. Now, I think it's interesting to bring, AWS and 3M together. You recently announced AWS Health Scribe. So, Tassin, maybe you could start. How did this come together across your organization and help people understand what is AWS Health Scribe generally?
Sure, absolutely. So, first let me talk about how it came together, right? So at AWS, we are always looking at working backwards from our customers. So what that means is basically looking at what a customer's needs are, and then identifying the best way to address those needs with technological capabilities that we can provide. And we've had a long history of collaboration with 3M. And one of the areas with AWS's broad and deep background in ML, this was a natural area for 3M and AWS to collaborate in terms of trying to determine how do we address this problem with physician and clinician burnout, right? And what is the best way to kind of attack that problem? And 3M has a long history, as Detlef already talked about, and I'm sure we'll get into some more of really addressing the space. And we wanted to bring together the best of kind of AWS and 3M to tackle this problem. So that's maybe the background of collaboration. Where did HealthScribe come from, right? And then HealthScribe itself, I'll describe it a little bit, but the idea here is that we're all excited about generative AI. It's been the talk of the town for like the last 9-12 months. Yeah. But the question is, what are the real applications that can impact specifically in the healthcare space, right? And one of the areas I think naturally that before this there was transcription, right? Transcription, ML was very good at transcription, right? So taking physician-patient conversations and creating the transcript. But I think an ingredient that was missing that generative AI brings to the table is how do you then take that transcript and create a really good clinical summary, something that a doc would write when you go in for the patient visit, something that helps the quality and continuity of care, that helps with compliance, with reimbursement, all the things that clinical documentation is important for, right? And so with generative AI, we combine these ingredients together to create a capability that you can go in, you can have your live conversation between a patient and a physician, and you get a quality transcript. You get speaker role identification. So like who's the patient, who's the physician. If there are other speakers in the room, identifying that there's other speakers. You get segmentation. So things like, are you looking at, is there a segment where you're just doing small talk, you're just doing the intro conversations, maybe there's subjective, objective sections. And then from that, you get a preliminary summary created, right? Like your history of present illness, your kind of assessment, your plan, your chief complaint, like what a physician would write. And that's where the generative AI comes in. It generates that. And that preliminary document is then what's reviewed by the physician and then committed, right? So HealthScribe kind of does all those pieces, and then we work with 3M to integrate that into the workflows.
Interesting. Detlef, what would you add to this? And maybe let's extend the conversation. And, how does this solution compare to things like Nuance's DAX or DAX Express, which has been announced, but I don't think we've seen, Suki, is kind of a different angle on this one, or Ambience Healthcare, OnPoint. There's a bunch of these solutions. Can you give us a feel for, what else you'd add to this, and where does it fit in this ambient clinical voice space?
Yeah. So in Model, I pitched our board of directors for the first time on the idea of ambient documentation in 2016. So it's quite a long time in coming. And
I think I remember meeting with you at a HEMA or one of your colleagues hearing about the potential for this.
And at the time, honestly, we didn't really have the technology solution yet. We know the overall solution. It has it spans, well, like how do you capture the audio? How do you gain the patient's trust? How do you engage the physician at the time correctly? Then how do you get the data, contextualize it? How you then create an ambient draft through backend technology? But then how is it reviewed? How is it integrated? How do you manage the quality if you roll it out at enterprise scale? So I think the solution is one piece technology, and well, as usually, there's two pieces of workflow and embedding and integration, right? So coming back a little bit how we got started with AWS, we realized roughly 2 years ago that finally there is a good solution for the core technology aspects, and it's going to be like this generative large language models, transformers, everything that's in the news right now. Right, and so the match between us as a solutions provider and Amazon as a technology provider was a great fit, and to bring it into market. Right now, you ask how we compare to others in this space. Well, it's difficult for me to talk about others.
Sure.
I can tell you where we're focusing on. And
Okay.
for us, we are, well, we are around the block. So we introduced speech recognition when it was still new. And so we realized the complexities of getting new technology in the market, especially if expectations are super high, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we are equally excited and, well, respectfully cautious about the risks and complications of bringing something to market at enterprise scale, right? So for us, we're looking for the responsible approach to introduce the technology, again, without increasing operational risk for our customers. How can you assure quality across not one physician, but thousands of physicians at an enterprise scale? So our focus is on helping customers realize the benefits of scale without introducing well, operational risks.
Detlef, does this feel a little bit like Groundhog Day? Because you're right. When voice recognition was implemented, it had this promise, but you had to train it and then it wouldn't be perfect. And so then the expectation didn't meet the deliverable. And then eventually it did, right? Like it finally got good enough. You didn't have to train it. It was 99% accurate, all these things, right? Are we going to go through that same cycle with ambient clinical voice?
Yeah, and the problem probably was, looking way back now, the market expectations were set too high, right? There was something that we could deliver, even from the very early days of speech recognition in healthcare. There were niches where it could be used productively, but then from the early days in radiology, we jumped to broad market introduction without any intermediate steps, and some expectations were disappointed, right? And now we are not only, well, the risks is not only that you might disappoint somebody, but if you now try to automate clinical documentation is a super important piece of providing healthcare in the US and globally. So we cannot mess it up, right? And the drivers are so strong. I mean, for physicians can save hours of day every day out of the workday. So the drivers for adoption are so strong that, well, again, the responsible approach of introducing it and not setting expectations too high initially is going to be super important.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the challenge, is that the desire for the solution to work is huge. So that, I think that drives the expectation. That's interesting. Well, help us understand, Detlef, what is the workflow? Tassine said that they partnered with 3M to kind of do that workflow. What is the workflow? Are you using a device? Are you using the computers in the room? Are you using microphones? You know, what's the workflow look like for a clinician?
Yeah. So you alluded to the fact that we need to capture the audio. Now the way to capture it, I mean, we bring a ambient speaker device to market, like a dedicated device for multi-channel recordings. It is important to communicate to the patients that the dialogue is being recorded. We have to earn the patient's trust. We have to be transparent about this, and this will initially mean that on a patient-by-patient basis, the physician will need to get the approval of the patient.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, and it seems like 99% of patients say, sure, great.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we don't want to surprise this 1% of patients.
Sure.
And then again, it's about trust in the setting. But you can use other devices as well. And technically a mobile phone, if you're careful how you deploy it, would work. And the data is then streamed to our servers, is being, well, put in the right context of why is a patient here, who's a patient. We send this data to Amazon Health Scribe to creating a draft document. And the draft document will have to be reviewed either by a human scribe or by the physician, and then ultimately reviewed by the physician and signed off in the electronic medical record system.
Interesting. So you raised two things there. Maybe Tassine, you could chime in on some of this, like how much is automated with technology versus humans? What's the balance that you're, you know, how are you approaching all technology, all human, a mix? Where are you at?
Sure, absolutely. So from a health scribe perspective, you know, one of our key goals here is providing this technology in a way that is easy to use for healthcare solution builders, right? So 3M is a customer. There's going to be other customers, and you saw some of those in the announcement, but many others are interested. And the idea here is, how do we provide a secure, responsible, scalable capability that many folks can take to market in different scenarios, whatever the workflows, however they want to provide them, right? So from a health scribe perspective, we are fully automated, right? So there's no human in the loop, but the idea is that the note that's generated is a preliminary note, right? So what we do is we return the full transcript, the summary note, and in the summary note, we also cite where in the transcript each part of the summary insight came from, right? So if you see the chief complaint, you'll see in the transcript, this is where it came from. So that'll all be returned in the API and then can be surfaced in the workflow. So it is no human in the loop from that perspective, but we fully expect that humans are reviewing the note in their workflow before they commit that, right?
Yeah. And so Detlef, you said that a scribe would be reviewing it. Is that the approach you're taking, or do you think you'll eventually get where you pass it on to the doctor and the doctor's the final, or how do you see that progressing?
So our intent was absolutely to introduce it through scribes. I think still that might be a path that many organizations choose. How do you get started? How do you establish quality? The market desire is, of course, and the ultimate outcome is that the physicians themselves should get a high enough quality note out of the automated technology that they can immediately review it. So that's the ultimate goal. The question is how we get there, right?
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said, well, it's going to be 99% through scribing. Today, technology evolved. It got a lot better. So maybe some physicians will, from the beginning, use the technology out of the box. And how exactly this will shape out, going to be interesting to see.
Well, and I think that's the challenge that I talk to a lot of people about, is that if we have to have a human in the loop, a scribe or whoever it might be, it causes two challenges. One is the cost, right? And there's cost questions. And the second is, if you have to wait for the scribe to review, you can't do real-time clinical decision support and some of those other real-time things that you want to do. So I think those are the questions people are struggling with.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so I think scribes, I view a little bit like speech recognition was used primarily in back-end workflows where a human transcriptionist would review the speech recognition draft before the physician did. And then we saw a transition where, more and more physicians did it for self-edits or front-end speech recognition. But in this transitioned over a period of, I want to say at least 10 years. Now for this technology, I would expect the transition to be much faster. But I think there will be a transition period.
Sure. Interesting. And how are you integrating it with the EHR? Is this note going directly into the EHR, or what's the workflow there in integration?
Yeah. Again, the ideal is it goes directly in the EMR. But if you look at notes today, they are semi-structured, right? Of course, on the section level, but frequently there are certain sections are discretely captured in the EMR. And this will require new APIs, and those APIs are EMR specific. We do have the good old HL7 pass. We can just create a note and put it into any EMR, and physicians can review and sign in the EMR. That pass is pretty universally supported. But if you think about the more intelligent integration points, they are shaping up right now. And we are working with various EMR vendors on those integration points.
Yeah. We need the EMR vendors to open up. That's the interesting challenge. But
they are motivated as we are, and this is going to be a fantastic solution, and it is going to have societal impact based on how much time we can save physician. So it's not only us as a provider of the solution, but EMR vendors are equally motivated to bring this to market.
Yeah. Do clinicians have to change the way they're talking in the exam room to make the solution work, or what have you experienced in that regard?
Yeah. So I want to say that they don't have to change, and I think that's true. What we did observe, though, when introducing scribes, is that the technology cannot document anything that's not verbalized. right? And so same thing as for scribes. If the physician doesn't talk about things, they the scribe cannot catch it.
The scribe can't do it. The virtual scribe, if you will, can't do it either.
They can't make things up. So, so what we actually do observe in introducing the human scribe workflows is that physicians tend to verbalize more, and patients comment positively on this. Right? They comment that how great it is that the physician now talks more, explains more, and that has a dual benefit. One is for the patient, the other one is, well, if they give us more to work with, us as a scribe or as a technology, then we can create a more complete note. So again, technically there's no need for the physician to adopt, but we observe that the output gets better if the physician collaborates to a certain way.
Yassine, what would you add? And also, let's talk about how accurate is this solution. It's interesting, we compared it to voice recognition that went through an evolution of quality, but where are we at today on how accurate the solution is?
Sure. So I really like how on the previous question how Detlef put it, and I've just a funny, like in my head, the analogy I have is sometimes like if you get more feedback, you modify your behavior. And I think physicians are going to be the same way, right? There's no reason for them to have to speak differently or verbalize things differently. But the idea is really the better the note is, right, the more useful it is for them. So at that point, I think they're going to start talking about things. So I was going to draw this analogy too. I don't know if when you got in cars, you started to see fuel economy feedback, right? Like on how you drove. And I think at the time I first introduced, I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. But like I noticed myself changing how I drive based on the feedback of like the fuel economy. And I think it's similar, right? It's not about like I had to force myself to change. It's more about, hey, based on the feedback, and that's exactly what Detlef is describing, is in a physician-patient conversation, if the patient comes away with better information because of the conversation is going a certain way, that's super useful, right? That even more useful than just the note being good. You're now getting a better experience, both a better clinician-patient experience. So I think that's pretty exciting as whether it's a side effect or as an evolving effect of this kind of technology as well, right?
Great analogy.
Yeah, from an accuracy perspective, the reason that we kind of cite each insight back to the transcript is to build that confidence for the user, right? So we're not like, I think you're right, we'll go through a cycle here of what's the accuracy like, but this is a little different, I think, than just straight transcription accuracy, right? Because that you can judge just by, okay, I hear the words and they're here.
Sure,
and
it's more complex.
This is a little bit different, right? So the way we're approaching that is to provide a way that users can see the insight came from this section, and they can look at that, and that's how we build the trust. Obviously, for the way we judge the capability, right, we're looking at things like factual completeness, like, do the facts that are in the transcript show up in the summary? We're looking at things like accuracy. So like, how do we minimize hallucination? So how do we ensure that, something that the generative AI isn't generating something that isn't in the transcript, right? So those kinds of things, and how do we ensure coherence? So things like, does the note flow? Is it in the right kind of way that the physician would understand it and express it themselves, or the clinician would? So those are all things we're looking at internally, but the way we express that externally is through kind of the citing back the insight to the transcript, and you get both sets of information. And we find that that's gotten really good feedback from users.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you're doing that. I haven't heard anyone else doing that. So I think that's a really interesting approach. It's almost like going back to the source documentation, right? Like that's so powerful. Was this a rule out diagnosis or was it a real diagnosis? And, the transcript would answer that in a really meaningful way to know if it was captured accurately. So it's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, even the definition of what is an accurate, what is a good note, is surprisingly complex, right? The easiest passes are like factual correctness is whatever you put in the note correct. I mean, hallucination or distortion of facts and so on. That's relatively easy to measure. Then completeness is already a little bit more complex because different physicians have different, the average note by physician varies drastically, right? There is no
Sure.
standard. Some physicians like to include some things, others don't. Then Tessin touched on it already. What is like the downstream use cases for a node? If you want to communicate to a patient or another care provider, like what is a good node? How verbose does it have to be? How does it flow, right? You have to meet, the node has to be fit to support reimbursement workflows. Maybe the reimbursement workflow is now an accountable care organization, then you have to document differently for that, right? Finally, when introducing structured reporting tools 10, 15 years ago, EMR vendors found that physicians didn't really like the generic nodes that were generated out of those tools, right? Their personal way of documenting and thus kind of an aspect of practicing medicine was lost in the very highly structured documentation tools. And now we are automating the whole process. So there too, and we have to, how do we keep it physician specific in a way that the physician recognize themselves in the node, and the node actually don't only meet the reimbursement needs, but also like how and what the physician wants to communicate. And this is something that is not well defined in the space right now. It gets a lot of attention right now, and we are defining it, but it will need to be, well, it need to evolve. And interestingly, I mean, if you try to derive from physicians, like talking about it, what is a good node? It's not really that well defined.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point. We need a lot of different nodes. We need a node that works for patients, and there's even companies working on that, right? Like, how do I take the doctorese and make it patient friendly, you know, versus what does the doctor need for the next visit, or a doctor that they're referring to, and then you know, what does the reimbursement need, you know, is a totally different note, right? That justifies the billing requirements. What does the nurse need, you know, et cetera, right? And it feels like that's where we're headed, is to this generative AI for whatever your context is needed. And I mean, what's cool is this is actually possible now. It seems like that's where we're headed. Well, I want to hit one other detail, which I think was pretty clear in your announcement, but for those that didn't see it, you know, how does this product work for every specialty? What's your focus? Are you looking to expand? Yeah, I don't, Tessin, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially, we're looking at, we support general medicine and orthopedics, and those are the specialties that we support. And then, you know, as I said before, we're working with customers. So obviously we're working very closely with 3M, and we'll do the same with other customers. And then depending on where the focus is, we definitely will be interested in expanding. But initially, this is where we thought the most value would be based on our conversations.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you can do primary care, I think you can do a
Exactly.
lot of other specialties. That's, I think that's what we've learned
Great
from some of
place to
these
start.
things. Yeah, that's great. Any final thoughts, Detlef, on this?
Yeah, it's a starting point to introduce it again. We are looking for a controlled, responsible introduction of the technology. I think the technology, the backend technology, is probably not going to be the rate limiter in getting to other domains. I mean, that's
Interesting. Well, and yeah, there, like you say, there's the workflow issue, and the even the mental space for people to trust the technology. You know, that's going to be an evolution, like has always been with every technology that's been implemented. Tessin, where can people go to learn more about this?
For AWS HealthScribe, you can go to aws.amazon.com /HealthScribe. So pretty simple. And there you can see kind of features, capabilities, pricing, you know, use cases, things like that. And that has a lot of kind of the detail about the service.
Awesome. And Detlef, how about on the 3M side?
I would also like to refer to our websites, 3m.com, Health Information Systems. It contains a lot of information about the technology and the product.
Awesome. Well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and share about this exciting new solution. I have a feeling we'll be 6 months from now, it will be a whole iteration forward. So it's moving so quickly. So thanks for sharing your insights and perspectives, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast application. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.